They found her car first. Engine still warm, keys in the ignition, purse on the passenger seat. But Emily Marsh, she was gone, vanished from a grocery store parking lot in broad daylight. And when they finally found her 3 weeks later, she couldn't remember a single thing. Not where she'd been, not who took her, nothing. But here's what makes this case absolutely terrifying. She wasn't the only one. And the truth about what happened during those missing weeks. It's darker than anyone could have imagined. Let me take you back to where this all started. March 14th, 2021. Bloomington, Indiana, a college town where nothing this strange was supposed to happen. Emily Marsh was 28 years old, a graphic designer working from home, engaged to be married in 6 months. By all accounts, she was living a perfectly normal, happy life. She had no enemies, no debts, no secrets. At least that's what everyone thought. That Thursday afternoon, Emily did what she'd done 100 times before. She drove to the Kroger on West 3rd Street to pick up groceries for the week. Security cameras captured her walking through the automatic doors at 2:17 p.m. She was wearing a blue hoodie and jeans. She had her phone in her hand. She looked completely normal, relaxed even. She spent 23 minutes inside the store, bought milk, chicken, pasta, the usual things, paid with her debit card. The cashier later said Emily seemed perfectly fine. Cheerful, actually. She even made a joke about forgetting her reusable bags again. Emily walked out of that store at 2:40 p.m. The cameras show her pushing her cart across the parking lot toward her silver Honda Civic. She loaded the bags into her trunk, returned the cart to the nearest corral, got into her car. And then, nothing. The cameras didn't cover that specific section of the lot very well. There was a blind spot, a gap in the footage, and somehow, impossibly, that's exactly where Emily's car was parked. Her fiancé, Marcus Webb, started to worry around 6 p.m. when she wasn't answering her phone. Emily always answered. Always. By 7 p.m., he was calling her friends. By 8, he was calling hospitals. And by 9:30 that night, he was standing in a police station filing a missing persons report. The officer taking the report tried to reassure him. Said most missing adults turn up within 48 hours, usually just a misunderstanding. But Marcus knew. Something was very, very wrong. The next morning, a Kroger employee found Emily's car still sitting in the parking lot. Same spot. The groceries were rotting in the trunk. Her phone was on the floor of the backseat, battery dead. Her keys were still in the ignition, turned to the accessory position like she'd been listening to the radio. The driver's door was unlocked. And here's the detail that made every investigator's blood run cold. Her seatbelt was still buckled, still fastened across the driver's seat, as if she'd simply vanished from behind the wheel. The police treated the scene as a potential abduction. They dusted for prints, searched for signs of struggle, found nothing. No blood, no torn fabric, no scratches on the door handles. It was like Emily had evaporated into thin air. The lead detective, a veteran named Robert Chen, later admitted he'd never seen anything like it in 23 years on the force. People don't just disappear from locked cars in public parking lots, he said. But Emily did. The investigation moved fast at first. They interviewed everyone who'd been at the store that day, checked security footage from nearby businesses, searched the surrounding woods and fields. Marcus was questioned extensively, as partners always are, but he had an airtight alibi. He'd been in a virtual work meeting with 6 colleagues at the exact time Emily vanished. They cleared him within 48 hours. Emily's family flew in from Ohio. Her mother, Patricia, made tearful pleas on the local news. The story started getting regional attention, but there were no leads, no witnesses, no demands for ransom, just silence. Then, on day 4 of the investigation, something strange happened. Detective Chen got a call from a police department 3 hours south, in Louisville, Kentucky. They'd just taken a missing persons report that sounded almost identical. A 32-year-old woman named Vanessa Torres had disappeared from a Target parking lot 2 days earlier. Her car was found the next morning, same as Emily's. Engine off, but keys in the ignition, purse inside, phone dead. No signs of struggle. And here's what made Chen's stomach drop. Vanessa's seatbelt was also still buckled. 2 women, 2 different cities, same impossible disappearance. Chen immediately contacted the FBI. This was no longer a local case. This was a pattern. And if there were 2 victims, there were probably more. The FBI assigned a team led by Special Agent Nicole Reeves, a specialist in abduction cases. She'd seen a lot in her career, but even she was disturbed by the details. The precision of it, the lack of evidence. Whoever was doing this knew exactly how to avoid cameras, witnesses, and forensic traces. This wasn't some crime of opportunity. This was planned, practiced, perfected. Agent Reeves started pulling data from across the Midwest. She was looking for similar cases, women who'd vanished from parking lots with their cars left behind. And what she found was absolutely chilling. Over the past 14 months, there had been 6 other cases that fit the pattern. 6 women, all between the ages of 26 and 34. All disappeared from grocery stores or big-box retail parking lots in the late afternoon. All of their cars found within 24 hours, keys inside, no signs of struggle. But here's the thing that made this case different from typical serial abductions. Most of those 6 women had eventually been found. Alive. Let me explain. 4 of the 6 previous victims had reappeared, seemingly out of nowhere, between 2 and 4 weeks after they'd vanished. They were found wandering along rural roads, or dropped off at gas stations, or discovered sleeping in parks. Disoriented, dehydrated, physically unharmed for the most part, but mentally, they were shattered, and not one of them could remember anything about where they'd been or what had happened to them. Complete amnesia. The FBI had conducted extensive interviews, medical exams, hypnosis sessions. Nothing worked. It was like someone had erased those weeks from their minds. 2 of the 6 women were still missing, presumed dead. Their cases had gone cold. But now, with Emily and Vanessa, the count was up to 8. And the FBI was starting to understand they were dealing with something unprecedented. This wasn't a typical trafficking operation. Victims in those cases don't usually get returned. And this wasn't a ransom scheme because no demands were ever made. So what was happening to these women during those missing weeks? And why couldn't they remember? Marcus was drowning. That's the only way to describe it. Every day without Emily felt like suffocating. He stopped going to work, stopped eating. He spent 18 hours a day searching, driving back roads, posting flyers, checking every abandoned building in 3 counties. His friends tried to support him, but there was nothing they could say. The not knowing was torture. Was she alive? Was she suffering? Was she calling out for him while he slept? The questions never stopped. On day 12, Marcus got a call from Agent Reeves. She needed to ask him something sensitive. Had Emily ever mentioned feeling like she was being watched? Had she noticed any strange cars following her? Any unusual phone calls or messages? Marcus thought hard. And then he remembered something. About 2 weeks before Emily disappeared, she'd mentioned a white van that seemed to show up wherever she went. She'd seen it at the gym, then at the coffee shop, then in their neighborhood. She joked about it, said maybe she had a secret admirer with terrible taste in vehicles. Marcus had laughed it off. Now, the memory made him want to vomit. Agent Reeves' team started looking for white vans in the security footage from all 8 abduction sites. And they found it. The same van, or at least the same make and model, appeared in the background of footage from 6 of the 8 locations. Always at a distance. Always parked in a way that obscured the license plate. The driver was never visible, but it was there. A Ford Transit, white, no company logos, no identifying marks. It was like a ghost. The FBI issued a regional alert. They needed information on any white Ford Transit vans purchased or rented in the past 18 months. The response was overwhelming. There were thousands of them. The team started the tedious process of tracking down every owner, checking alibis, looking for connections to the victims. It was a massive undertaking. And while they worked, Emily was still out there, somewhere. 3 weeks and 1 day after Emily vanished, a gas station attendant in Terre Haute, Indiana, called 911. There was a woman in the parking lot, he said. She was barefoot, wearing dirty clothes, and she seemed confused. When police arrived, they found Emily Marsh sitting on the curb, staring at nothing. She was dehydrated and underweight. Her feet were cut and bruised, but she was alive. The officer who found her radioed it in with shaking hands. "We've got her," he said. "We've got Emily Marsh." They rushed her to the hospital, called Marcus, called her family, called Agent Reeves. Everyone descended on Terre Haute within hours. Marcus broke down the moment he saw her. He held her like he'd never let go. But Emily, she barely responded. She looked at him with empty eyes like she didn't quite recognize him, like she was looking at a stranger. The doctors ran every test imaginable. Physically, aside from dehydration, malnutrition, and the injuries to her feet, she was okay. No signs of sexual assault. No broken bones, no drugs in her system. But mentally, she was gone. Emily couldn't tell them anything. She didn't remember being taken, didn't remember where she'd been, didn't remember how she'd gotten to that gas station. The last thing she remembered was loading groceries into her trunk at Kroger. And then, nothing. 3 weeks of her life just erased. The doctors called it dissociative amnesia, likely caused by extreme psychological trauma. Her brain had shut down to protect her from whatever she'd experienced. But that explanation didn't satisfy anyone, not Marcus, not her family, and definitely not Agent Reeves, because here's what bothered Reeves the most. Emily was the fifth victim to be returned alive, and just like the others, she had no memory. But unlike some of the others, Emily hadn't been beaten or tortured. There were no physical signs of prolonged captivity. Her clothes, though dirty, weren't torn. So what had happened to her? Where had she been? And most importantly, why had she been let go? The FBI brought in specialists, psychologists, hypnotherapists, experts in recovered memory. They tried everything to help Emily remember, but every session ended the same way, with Emily crying, frustrated, unable to access those lost weeks. It was like trying to open a door that had been welded shut. Marcus watched his fiancée struggle, and it broke him in new ways every single day. The woman he loved was physically there, but part of her was still gone, still trapped in wherever she'd been. 2 weeks after Emily's return, Vanessa Torres was found. She turned up outside a hospital in Evansville, Indiana. Same condition, confused, malnourished, no memory. The pattern held. Agent Reeves knew they were close to something. The perpetrator was active, confident, and clearly operating in a specific region. Indiana, Kentucky, Southern Illinois. But without memories from the victims, they had no description, no location, no evidence. And then something unexpected happened. Emily started having nightmares. Terrible, vivid nightmares that left her screaming in the middle of the night. She couldn't describe them clearly when she woke up, but fragments would slip through. A basement, metal walls, a humming sound, the smell of disinfectant, and voices. Multiple voices. Marcus reported everything to Agent Reeves. The FBI psychologist suggested these might be repressed memories trying to surface. They decided to try a new approach. Instead of pushing Emily to remember, they'd let the memories come naturally and document everything. Over the next 3 weeks, Emily's nightmares became more detailed. She started sketching things she saw in her dreams. Rough drawings of a room with no windows, a metal door with a strange lock, symbols on the wall that looked almost scientific. None of it made sense yet, but Agent Reeves felt like they were getting closer. She shared Emily's drawings with the other survivors. And that's when things got even stranger. 3 of the other women recognized elements from Emily's drawings. They'd seen the same room, the same symbols, they'd been in the same place. This was the breakthrough Reeves had been waiting for. If multiple victims could corroborate details, even subconsciously, then there was a real location. A real place where these women had been held. The FBI analysts started working with the fragments. They estimated the room was underground, based on descriptions of the temperature and the echo. The humming sound suggested some kind of machinery or ventilation system. The metal walls indicated a reinforced structure, possibly industrial, possibly military. They were building a profile of the location piece by piece. But then Emily remembered something else, something that changed everything. During one of her nightmares, she saw a face, not clearly. Not enough to identify, but she saw someone standing over her, and she heard words. "You're going to help us," the voice said. "You're going to be part of something important." Emily woke up screaming those words. Marcus held her while she sobbed. And when she finally calmed down, she looked at Agent Reeves with terrified eyes and said something that made everyone in the room go cold. "I think there were others there. More women. I think I saw them." Agent Reeves immediately contacted the other survivors. She asked them individually if they remembered seeing other women. 2 of them did. They remembered faces, scared faces, women in the same room lying on metal cots. This wasn't just about abduction anymore. This was something organized. Something bigger. The FBI theorized they were looking at some kind of facility, a place where multiple victims were held simultaneously. But for what purpose? That was still the terrifying question no one could answer. The investigation intensified. The FBI started looking at properties in the region. Abandoned factories, old military installations, underground bunkers, anywhere that matched the descriptions piecing together from the survivors' fractured memories. They had dozens of agents combing through property records, satellite imagery, utility usage reports. It was an enormous task, but they were motivated because they knew 2 things for certain. First, there were still 2 women from the original 6 who'd never been found. And second, this perpetrator was still out there, still hunting. Marcus noticed Emily was changing. She'd always been outgoing, energetic, full of life, but now she was withdrawn, paranoid. She refused to leave the house. She'd installed 3 extra locks on every door. She kept the curtains closed all day, and she'd started saying strange things. Sometimes she'd stop mid-conversation and stare at nothing, like she was listening to something only she could hear. Marcus tried to be patient, tried to understand, but he was scared. Scared that even though Emily's body had come back, her mind might never fully return. One night, 6 weeks after her return, Emily woke Marcus at 3 a.m. She was sitting up in bed, perfectly still, staring at the wall. Marcus asked if she was okay. She didn't respond. He touched her shoulder and she turned to look at him. Her eyes were wide, terrified. "They tested us," she whispered. "They put things in our heads." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. "What are you talking about?" he asked, but Emily just shook her head. "I can't remember," she said, "but I know they did. I can feel it." The next morning, Marcus called Agent Reeves and told her everything. Reeves arranged for Emily to undergo a full neurological examination. MRI, CT scan, EEG. They were looking for anything unusual, any sign of foreign objects or unexplained abnormalities. The results came back clean. There was nothing physically wrong with Emily's brain. But the neurologist noted something interesting. Emily's brain activity during sleep was unusual. Her REM cycles were irregular, with unexpected spikes in certain regions associated with memory formation and recall. It was like her brain was working overtime to process something, or like something was preventing normal memory consolidation. Agent Reeves started exploring a new theory. What if the memory loss wasn't just psychological? What if it was induced? There were documented cases of drugs that could cause temporary amnesia. Benzodiazepines, Rohypnol, even certain anesthetics. But those drugs would show up in toxicology screens, and none of the victims had tested positive for anything. So either the substance used was something exotic that cleared the system quickly, or the memory disruption was caused by something else entirely. Some kind of psychological conditioning, trauma-based mind control. The possibilities were disturbing. While the FBI investigated, Emily's nightmares grew worse. She was sleeping less than 3 hours a night. She'd lost 15 pounds. Her hands shook constantly. Marcus was desperate. He contacted every specialist he could find. Tried alternative therapies, meditation, EMDR, acupuncture, nothing helped. Emily was trapped in her own mind, haunted by memories she couldn't fully access. It was torture, and Marcus could do nothing but watch. Then, 3 months after Emily's return, something happened that broke the case wide open. One of the other survivors, a woman named Jessica Hallbrook from the first wave of abductions, called Agent Reeves in a panic. She'd remembered something. A name, she didn't know how or why, but during a dream she'd heard someone say a name. Dr. Kelvin. She didn't know if it was a first name or a last name. Didn't know if it was real or imagined, but it felt important. Reeves ran the name through every database available. Local, state, federal, and she found something. Dr. Nathan Kelvin, age 49, former neuroscientist. He'd worked for a pharmaceutical research company based in Indianapolis until 7 years ago when he'd been quietly let go. The official reason was budget cuts, but Reeves dug deeper. She found internal emails suggesting Kelvin had been pursuing unauthorized research, something involving memory manipulation and neural conditioning. The company had shut down his lab and terminated him to avoid liability. After that, Kelvin had disappeared from the academic world. No publications, no new employment, no digital footprint. He'd gone dark. Reeves tracked down Kelvin's last known address. A house in a rural area outside of Martinsville, Indiana, right in the middle of the geographic zone where all the abductions had occurred. The FBI obtained a warrant and raided the property with a full tactical team. The house was empty, abandoned, but in the basement they found something that made everyone's skin crawl. A makeshift laboratory, whiteboards covered in equations and diagrams, notes about memory suppression and behavioral conditioning. And most damning of all, photographs, dozens of photographs of women. Emily was in those photos, so was Vanessa. So were 4 of the other survivors, and there were 2 women in the photos who were still missing. But Kelvin himself was nowhere to be found. The house had been abandoned for at least a month, according to forensic analysis. He'd cleared out and vanished. The FBI issued a federal warrant for his arrest. His photo was sent to every law enforcement agency in the country. But Kelvin was smart. He'd planned for this. He'd probably known it was only a matter of time before someone connected the dots. and he'd made sure he'd be long gone when they did. The investigation into Kelvin's background revealed a deeply disturbed individual. Colleagues from his research days described him as brilliant but obsessed. He'd believed that human memory was the key to controlling behavior, that if you could selectively erase and implant memories, you could fundamentally reshape a person's identity. His research had crossed ethical lines repeatedly, which was why the pharmaceutical company had cut ties. But instead of stopping, he'd gone underground, and he'd continued his experiments, using real people, unwilling subjects. Agent Reeves briefed Emily on what they'd discovered, showed her Kelvin's photo. Emily stared at the image for a long time, and then she nodded. "I know him," she said quietly. "I don't remember how, but I know his face." Marcus felt rage surge through him. This monster had taken his fiancée, had experimented on her, had violated her mind in ways that might never heal. He wanted Kelvin found. He wanted justice. But more than that, he wanted answers. What had Kelvin done to Emily? What had been the purpose of holding these women? The FBI's working theory was that Kelvin had been conducting unsanctioned human trials of memory manipulation techniques. He'd abduct women, hold them in his facility for several weeks, subject them to his experimental procedures, and then release them once he'd gathered his data. The amnesia was likely a combination of drugs and psychological conditioning designed to prevent the victims from identifying him or his location. It was methodical, clinical, evil, and the fact that 2 women were still missing suggested that not all of his experiments had gone according to plan. Reeves assigned a team to search for Kelvin's facility. They knew it existed. The survivors' memories confirmed it. But where? The FBI analyzed every detail from the fragmented recollections. The humming sound, the metal walls, the underground location, the temperature. They cross-referenced with properties Kelvin had been associated with, and they found a lead. 10 years ago, before his termination, Kelvin had co-owned a piece of land with a colleague. 40 acres of wooded property near Nashville, Indiana. County records showed an old agricultural bunker on the site, built during the Cold War era. It had been sold years ago to a private buyer, a shell company, untraceable. But the FBI was willing to bet that Kelvin was the real owner. They assembled a team and descended on the property. It took them 6 hours to locate the bunker entrance. It was hidden beneath overgrown brush and camouflage netting. The metal door was exactly as Emily had drawn it, strange lock and all. The tactical team breached the entrance and went in. What they found inside would haunt every agent who saw it. The bunker had been converted into a research facility. There were 3 rooms with metal cots, medical equipment, computers filled with data, and in the back room they found them. The 2 missing women, alive barely, Sarah Hollies and Jennifer Cade. They'd been missing for over a year. They were emaciated, weak, barely conscious, but alive. The medical team rushed them to the hospital. Both women were in critical condition, suffering from severe malnutrition and dehydration. But they would survive, and more importantly, they were free. Kelvin's nightmare facility had been found. His experiments were over. But Kelvin himself still wasn't there. The bunker had been abandoned for weeks. The FBI seized all the computers and files. What they found in that data was both groundbreaking and horrifying. Kelvin had been documenting everything, every procedure, every dose of his experimental compounds, every psychological conditioning session. He'd been trying to develop a method to permanently erase specific memories while keeping the rest of the mind intact. And according to his notes, he'd been making progress. Real, terrifying progress. The implications were staggering. If Kelvin had actually succeeded in creating a reliable memory erasure technique, the potential for abuse was limitless. Intelligence agencies, criminal organizations, even governments. Everyone would want that technology. And Kelvin, now a fugitive, possessed that knowledge. The FBI escalated the manhunt to the highest priority. This wasn't just about justice for his victims anymore. This was about preventing a dangerous breakthrough from falling into the wrong hands. Emily was informed that they'd found the facility, that they'd rescued the 2 missing women. Marcus watched her process the information. She cried, not from sadness, but from relief. It was real, she said. I wasn't crazy. It was real. Agent Reeves assured her that everything she'd remembered was accurate, that her mind had been fighting to reveal the truth, even when it couldn't access the full memories. Emily had been incredibly brave. And now, with the facility found and the data seized, maybe the specialists could finally help her recover. Over the next several months, The FBI's forensic psychologists used Kelvin's own notes to develop a counter-protocol, a way to help the survivors process and recover their suppressed memories safely. It was experimental and risky, but the women agreed to try. One by one, they underwent the treatment, and slowly, painfully, the memories started coming back. Emily remembered the abduction. She remembered a figure approaching her car, a spray of something in her face, waking up in the bunker. She remembered weeks of tests, injections, questions. Kelvin's voice, calm and clinical, explaining that she was helping advance science. She remembered the other women, the fear, the helplessness, but she also remembered something else, something that changed the entire narrative. Kelvin hadn't been working alone. There had been someone else in the facility, a woman, younger, assisting him. Emily described her to the FBI sketch artist. And when Agent Reeves ran the image through facial recognition, they got a hit. Dr. Kara Novick, age 34, also a neuroscientist, former graduate student under Kelvin. She'd vanished from academic records around the same time he had. The FBI had been looking for one perpetrator, but there were two. The hunt expanded. Now they were searching for both Kelvin and Novick. The U.S. Marshals joined the manhunt. International agencies were alerted in case they'd fled the country. But months passed with no sightings, no leads. It was like they'd vanished completely. The case remained open, active, but cold. The survivors, meanwhile, were beginning to heal. Therapy helped, support groups helped, time helped. Emily and Marcus postponed their wedding but didn't cancel it. They were determined to rebuild their life, to reclaim what had been stolen from them. Then, almost a year after the bunker was discovered, the FBI got a break. A woman matching Kara Novick's description had been spotted in Missoula, Montana. Local police were dispatched. They found her working under a fake name at a medical clinic. She didn't run, didn't resist. When they arrested her, she seemed almost relieved, like she'd been waiting for it. During interrogation, she gave up everything. She told them where Kelvin was hiding, a remote cabin in northern Canada. She explained the research, admitted her role, and she revealed something that made Agent Reeves' blood boil. Kelvin hadn't stopped. Even after they'd shut down the bunker, he'd continued his experiments. Novick had finally refused to help him, which was why she'd fled. But Kelvin was still out there, still experimenting, and there might be more victims. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police raided the cabin coordinates Novick provided. And they found him, Dr. Nathan Kelvin, age 50, surrounded by research notes and lab equipment. He was arrested without incident, extradited to the United States, and charged with 8 counts of kidnapping, multiple counts of assault, and a litany of other crimes. His trial became national news. The details of his experiments shocked the country, but in the end, justice was served. Kelvin was convicted on all counts, sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Kara Novick, in exchange for her cooperation, received a reduced sentence of 20 years. Emily attended the sentencing. She sat in the courtroom and looked Kelvin in the eyes as the judge read the verdict. And she felt something she hadn't felt in almost 2 years. Closure. It wasn't complete healing. The trauma would always be part of her, but knowing that he would never hurt anyone else, that helped. Marcus held her hand through the entire proceeding. And when it was over, they walked out of that courtroom together and started planning their future. 6 months later, Emily and Marcus got married. It was a small ceremony, family and close friends only. Agent Reeves even attended, which meant the world to Emily. The other survivors were there too, women who'd been through hell together and had somehow found their way back. They were more than survivors now. They were warriors. They'd faced something unimaginable, and they'd won. Not just by surviving, but by refusing to let that experience define them. Emily still has nightmares sometimes, but they're less frequent now. She's back to work. She's laughing again. She's living again. And every day she makes a choice. To be stronger than her trauma, to be more than what was done to her. Marcus supports her through the hard days, celebrates with her on the good days, and together they're building something beautiful out of the wreckage, because that's what survivors do. They take the broken pieces and create something new, something stronger. The FBI closed the case officially, but Agent Reeves still thinks about it, about how close they came to never finding those women, about how many victims might still be out there from other predators running similar operations. The case changed how the Bureau approaches pattern abductions. New protocols were established. New interagency cooperation was implemented. Emily's case became a teaching example at Quantico, a reminder of why they do this work. A reminder that every victim matters, every case matters, because behind every file number is a real person, a real life, real trauma, and real hope for justice. As for Emily, she's become an advocate. She speaks at conferences about trauma recovery. She works with organizations that support survivors of violent crimes. She uses her experience to help others find their way through the darkness. Because she knows what it's like to be lost, to feel broken, to wonder if you'll ever feel whole again. And she knows what it's like to come out the other side. Scarred, yes. Changed, absolutely. But alive, free, and determined to make sure her story helps someone else survive theirs. If you or someone you know has experienced abduction or trauma, please reach out for help. You are not alone. There are resources, there are people who care, there is hope, and there is healing. Emily's story is proof of that. She was taken. She was broken, but she came back, and she's thriving. Not because what happened to her didn't matter, but because she decided that what she does next matters more. That's the power of the human spirit. That's the strength of a survivor. And that's the message we want to leave you with today. No matter what darkness you've faced, there is light on the other side. You just have to keep moving toward it. Thank you for watching Vanished and Found. If this story impacted you, please leave a comment below. Share your thoughts. Share your own story if you feel safe doing so. And make sure you're subscribed because we're going to keep bringing you stories of people who vanished, people who were lost, and people who found their way home. Stories that matter, stories that need to be told. Until next time, stay safe out there.